Miami tied its all-time record for hottest day in 84 years yesterday. Not its August record, its all-time record, 100 degrees Fahrenheit at Miami International Airport, tying a mark set in 1942. 84 years of summers, thousands of August afternoons, and the city just equaled the worst it has ever recorded. That is not a data point. That is a statement about the kind of summer 2026 has become. Over 70 million Americans are currently under active heat alerts, stretching from Texas to the Carolinas. Heat index values hit 115 degrees in parts of southern Georgia this week. And the number I keep coming back to, the number that does not get enough attention, is not the daytime high. It is the overnight low. Overnight lows across the major metro areas from New Orleans to Atlanta to Charlotte have refused to fall below the low 80s. When your body cannot cool down after dark, heat stress does not reset, it compounds. By day 3 or 4 of that cycle, the physiological risk to anyone without reliable air conditioning crosses into genuinely dangerous territory. For the elderly, for outdoor workers, for children, for anyone with cardiovascular or respiratory conditions, this is not an uncomfortable week. It is a medical event that builds silently night by night. So let me tell you exactly what is coming over the next 7 days, who is most exposed, why the overnight temperature failure is the real story, and why I think the pattern driving all of this is connected to something much larger than a single summer heat event. Because there is a bigger story underneath this heat. And by the time we get through today's breakdown, you're going to understand why 2026 is not behaving like a typical August, because it is not. Let me start with the 7-day roadmap, because the sequence matters as much as the peak numbers. Today is Friday, August 21st. The double-barreled heat dome anchored over the southern United States this week continues to hold without any meaningful sign of weakening. The GFS and the European model are in close agreement on the broad pattern. A ridge of high pressure sits parked from eastern Texas all the way across the Gulf Coast and into the southeast. Beneath that ridge, temperatures are running 8 to 12 degrees above normal for this time of year. Let me put that in context. This is not 8 to 12 degrees above January normal. This is 8 to 12 degrees above what August already is, in the south, in late summer, when the baseline is already one of the hottest climatic averages in the country. Saturday, August 22nd brings no meaningful change for Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, or coastal South Carolina. Highs will range from 97 to 103 degrees across the interior South, with heat indices hitting 110 to 115 in the most vulnerable spots, the river valleys, the urban heat islands, the coast where humidity remains at peak levels. Jacksonville, Florida sits under a heat advisory through the weekend, with a forecast high of 101 and a heat index approaching 112. Memphis, Tennessee is looking at a heat index of 108 through Saturday evening. The cluster of cities along the I-20 corridor from Jackson, Mississippi through Montgomery and into Atlanta will see heat indices between 108 and 113 through Saturday afternoon and into the evening hours. If you are in any of those areas and you do not have reliable cooling, Saturday is the day to make a plan. Not Sunday, Saturday. Sunday, August 23rd, is where the models begin to show the very earliest signs of the ridge loosening slightly at its western edge. Oklahoma and North Texas may get a few degrees of relief, highs dropping to the mid-90s from the low hundreds. But the eastern anchor of this dome holds firmly through Sunday. The Carolinas, Georgia, and Florida see no break. Charlotte is forecast at 98 degrees, Savannah pushes to 102, and the overnight floors across the southeast on Sunday night stay in the upper 70s to low 80s. That will be 4 consecutive nights without meaningful overnight recovery across a region that has been living under this dome since mid-August. Monday, August 24th, here is where the models diverge in a way that I think tells you something important. The GFS has been running warm all week. The latest 12Z run this morning continued that bias, showing a slight eastward drift of the ridge that would pull extreme heat northward into the mid-Atlantic. Washington, D.C. on the GFS is sitting at 99 to 101 degrees on Monday and Tuesday. The European model is a few degrees cooler, holding D.C. in the mid to upper 90s for the same period. That gap matters for a densely populated corridor. But here is what neither model disagrees on. The I-95 corridor from Richmond north through Baltimore, Philadelphia, and into southern New Jersey is about to get pulled into the core heat zone sometime between Monday and Wednesday. This is a region of tens of millions of people, with urban heat island effects that push temperatures in dense neighbourhoods 3 to 7 degrees above the surrounding area, and with a significant percentage of lower-income residents in older housing stock with limited or no air conditioning. The mid-Atlantic entering a peak heat window on top of what the South has already been enduring is the next chapter of this event. Where are you watching from right now? If you're in the Mid-Atlantic or the Carolinas, drop your city in the comments. I want to understand where the overnight low is recovering and where it is failing completely. That information actually matters for how I track this. Tuesday, August 25th and Wednesday, August 26th. This is when the Euro and GFS begin finding more agreement, and what they agree on is sobering. The ridge executes a slow, grudging eastward shift. The core of the extreme heat, the air mass running at 100 to 105 degrees, migrates from the deep south toward the southeast and mid-Atlantic simultaneously. Places that took the worst of this in the first half of the week begin to ease slightly, but the areas from Virginia to New Jersey to southern New England are now entering their peak heat stress window. Boston is not immune from what I am seeing in the data. The Euro ensemble mean has Boston at 94 degrees on Wednesday, with a dew point near 70. That combination produces a heat index just over 100 degrees. Boston has had exactly 3 days above 100 degrees in its entire recorded weather history. Wednesday the 26th could become the 4th. Providence, Hartford and Worcester are all in a similar window between Tuesday and Thursday. Thursday, August 27th. I am not going to project false confidence on what happens beyond day 6. But every teleconnection indicator I'm looking at, the ensemble spread, the MJO phase, the blocking pattern over the North Atlantic, suggests that a cold front strong enough to clear the entire southern tier is not going to arrive before late next week at the absolute earliest. For the Gulf Coast and Southeast, no meaningful pattern change appears on any major model run I'm examining before August 28th. That is 7 full days of sustained dangerous heat across a region of more than 90 million people. 7 days of compounding thermal exposure. 7 days of overnight lows that refuse to give the body back what the afternoon took from it. That is the roadmap. Now let me tell you why this is happening and what is driving it. The atmospheric structure responsible for all of this is an omega block. If you have been following weather patterns for any length of time, you have heard this term. But let me make it concrete. An omega block forms when a massive ridge of high pressure becomes sandwiched between 2 troughs, one to the west, one to the east, creating a pattern that resembles the Greek letter omega. The result is atmospheric locking. Systems that would normally move through the region and break the heat pattern get deflected around the edges of the ridge. They go north around it or south around it, but they cannot punch through it. Meanwhile, the air beneath the dome sinks and compresses, warming through adiabatic descent. Clouds cannot form under a dome of subsiding air. Rain cannot fall. The land surface dries out rapidly, eliminating the evaporative cooling from soil moisture that normally moderates surface temperatures. And without any of those cooling mechanisms, the heat builds day after day with nothing to interrupt it. The omega block that has been anchored over the southern United States this week is not new to the summer of 2026. This is the 3rd major heat dome event of the summer. The first one was centered around July 4th. It killed at least 44 people in a single week. Atlantic City, New Jersey, tied its all-time temperature record at 106 degrees on Independence Day. Philadelphia recorded 3 consecutive days above 101 degrees, the first time that has happened in the city's history. Washington, D.C. hit 103 on July 4th, the hottest Independence Day in the capital's recorded history. Boston reached 100 degrees for just the 3rd time ever. The power grid in New Jersey buckled, leaving hundreds of thousands of homes without electricity during the worst of the heat. The second dome arrived in late July and produced a similar geographic footprint across the central and southern United States. And now this one, in the 3rd week of August. Here is what I want you to sit with. August is climatologically the hottest month of the year across the southern United States. The fact that the 3rd major heat dome of the summer is arriving in late August, when the atmosphere should be beginning its first whisper of seasonal transition, is not normal behaviour. The calendar should be working in your favour right now, slowly reducing solar angle and daily heating. Instead, the pattern is strengthening, and I want to spend some time on the overnight temperature piece specifically, because I do not think the public health significance of what is happening at night is getting the attention it deserves. Think about what a normal August night in Nashville looks like. Historically, the overnight low in Nashville in the third week of August averages around 68 degrees. This week, Nashville has been posting overnight lows of 79 and 80 degrees. That is an 11 to 12 degree departure from the climatological average overnight low, not the daytime high, the overnight low. In a city where outdoor workers leave for work before sunrise thinking the early morning hours will offer some relief, that assumption fails completely when the temperature at 5 in the morning is still 79 degrees. That worker starts the day already thermally stressed from a night of inadequate cooling. The National Weather Service research on heat stress is unambiguous. Heat-related illness risk does not correlate primarily with daytime peak temperatures. It correlates with integrated heat exposure, the total thermal load the body absorbs across a full 24-hour period, including the overnight window. When overnight lows stay above 78 degrees for multiple consecutive nights, the cumulative physiological exposure crosses into medically dangerous territory much faster than a single hot afternoon ever could. The body has a finite capacity to dissipate heat. When overnight recovery is inadequate, each subsequent day starts from a higher baseline of physiological stress. The GFS ensemble mean this morning is showing overnight lows of 77 to 81 degrees across the central Gulf Coast region through August 25th. That is 5 more nights of failed overnight cooling for communities that are already 4 or 5 days into this event. 5 nights where the thermal debt accumulates without interruption. New Orleans is posting a forecast low of 80 degrees Saturday night. The humidity in New Orleans adds a physiological dimension that a dry heat city at the same temperature does not experience. The human body's primary heat dissipation mechanism is evaporative cooling, sweat evaporating from the skin surface. At a dew point of 75 degrees, that mechanism becomes significantly impaired. At a dew point of 80 degrees or higher, evaporative cooling nearly stops functioning. New Orleans will see dew points in that range this weekend. A resident in New Orleans at 80 degrees and a dew point of 78 is in a far more dangerous physiological environment than a resident in Phoenix at 95 with a dew point of 40. Savannah, Georgia is forecast at a 79-degree overnight low Saturday. Charleston, South Carolina at 78. Montgomery, Alabama at 77. This is not one anomalous hot night. This is a sequence stretching back to mid-August with no meaningful overnight recovery in sight until at least August 27th across the southeast. 10 or more consecutive nights without the body being able to complete its natural cooling cycle. There is one model signal worth flagging for the weekend. The NAM has been picking up a small convective threat for Saturday evening across parts of southern Mississippi and southeastern Louisiana. If thunderstorms develop in that corridor, they could temporarily lower heat indices for 2 or 3 hours in affected areas. But based on the consistency of that signal across NAM runs, I am not confident in it. And even if storms develop, they will not change the overnight low temperatures that follow. The atmosphere resets to heat by Sunday morning regardless. The practical message from all of this is simple, but I want to say it plainly. Do not manage this event on a day-by-day basis. The danger is cumulative. If you have family or neighbours in the Gulf Coast or Southeast who you have not checked on in the past 48 hours, make that contact today. They may already be several days into a thermal debt they do not fully feel yet. Heat stress is often insidious that way, building below the threshold of conscious discomfort until it is not. I am Arthur, and this is US Weather Threat. If you want daily coverage of these pattern shifts as they evolve, and the situation across the South right now warrants daily attention, the subscribe button is directly below this video. I am tracking this every day and I will have an updated breakdown tomorrow. Now let me take you into the big picture, because there is a larger story under all of this, and I think it is the most important context for understanding not just this week, but the rest of the summer and the fall ahead. The Climate Prediction Center released its latest El Ninyo update on August 17th. Let me read you what it said. The Nino 3.4 region, the equatorial Pacific monitoring box that defines El Niño strength, averaged 1.8 degrees Celsius above normal over just the past week. The week before that, it was 1.5. The week before that, 1.3. This is not a slow drift. This is rapid intensification. And in the Nino 1+2 region off the northwest coast of South America, which typically warms before the main Nino 3.4 box and serves as the leading indicator, temperatures are now running 3.2 degrees Celsius above average. That is the current state of the Pacific Ocean. The CPC is assigning a 95% probability that this El Niño will reach very strong or Super El Ninyo status during the October through December window. Between right now in August and October, there is already a 75% probability that we are in Super El Ninyo conditions, not trending toward them. Already in them with high probability, 75%, this week, right now. The last time the Pacific Ocean showed this signature in a summer month was in the lead up to the 1997 to 1998 El Niño event. That event became the defining benchmark for what a Super El Niño means in terms of global weather disruption: flooding in California, drought in Australia, a suppressed Atlantic hurricane season, and temperature records that were not equaled for a decade. What the models are now projecting for this event, citing the ECMWF ensemble runs, the NOAA ACPC, and the BOM jointly, is that this El Niño may surpass 1997. The Nino 3.4 region is forecast to peak at 2.66 degrees Celsius above average between October and December. The previous record is 2.4 degrees. If those forecasts verify, and they carry a strong multi-model consensus, this will be the strongest El Niño in modern recorded history. Now let me connect that directly to what you're experiencing this week. El Niño does not cause heat waves the way a ridge of high pressure does. What it does is reshape the atmospheric environment in which everything else happens. A strengthening El Niño in summer amplifies the subtropical jet stream across the southern United States, that enhance jet steers ridges more effectively into the southern tier and increases their persistence. It suppresses Atlantic hurricane activity, which would otherwise introduce cloud cover, rainfall and moisture circulation that moderates heat in the eastern half of the country, and it creates a pattern bias toward the kind of omega block we are sitting under right now, that keeps the atmosphere locked for days and weeks rather than allowing the normal progression of weather systems through. The Walker cell, the planetary scale atmospheric circulation that El Niño disrupts, is at the center of this. In a neutral ENSO year, rising air over the warm western Pacific and sinking air over the cooler eastern Pacific maintains a circulation that drives global weather patterns. El Niño disrupts that engine by warming the eastern Pacific, flipping the sinking air eastward and reorganizing the jet stream. The stronger the El Niño, the more complete and forceful that reorganization. And the atmospheric signal of this El Niño is already showing up in the data before the oceanic anomaly has reached its peak. That is what makes this event unusual. The atmospheric system appears to be front-running the ocean, responding to the subsurface warming before it has fully reached the surface. When that happens, the atmospheric impact tends to be more compressed and more intense rather than gradual. The Gulf waters are part of this story. Gulf water temperatures are running above their late summer average right now. Every heat dome that draws air northward off the Gulf is pulling from a reservoir that is carrying more heat and more moisture than it would in a neutral or cool ocean year. That extra moisture and latent heat energy in the Gulf air mass amplifies the heat index at the surface and contributes to the overnight temperature floors staying elevated. The Gulf is not a passive backdrop to this heat event, it is an active amplifier. NOAA confirmed last month that July 2026 was the hottest calendar month in recorded United States history, breaking the previous record set in July 2023. The sea surface temperature anomaly map from August 19th shows warm anomalies not just in the equatorial Pacific but across the Gulf, the Western Atlantic, and down the coast of South America. The ocean system globally is running warmer than the historical average in nearly every major basin. This is the environment that is producing the summer of 2026. What does this mean for September? The Super El Ninyo forcing is not going to disappear when August ends. The subsurface Kelvin wave, a pulse of warm water propagating eastward beneath the Pacific surface, is expected to reach the surface in the coming weeks and amplify the atmospheric signal further. NOAA's probabilistic guidance shows above normal temperature probability across essentially the entire contiguous United States for August through October. Not a region, not a corridor, the entire country. The probabilistic weighting of above normal temperatures is strongest across the south, the west and the southwest, but no part of the lower 48 shows below average odds in any major model run right now. Cold fronts will still come in September. Pattern breaks will happen. The question is whether they will be strong enough and sustained enough to actually allow temperatures to return to near normal levels, or whether the El Niño background forcing keeps the atmospheric baseline elevated between events. The ensemble data right now leans clearly toward the latter. September will likely feel warmer than a neutral September across most of the country, the southern tier especially. one piece of the longer range pattern that I want to flag specifically, and I will be tracking this closely in the coming days. As this ridge eventually shifts eastward in late August and early September, the trough that forms to its west will create a sharp contrast zone across the central plains. A sharp gradient between an entrenched warm moist air mass in the south and a digging trough out of Canada is precisely the environment that produces organised severe weather outbreaks. I am watching the period from roughly August 29th through September 7th very carefully. If a significant trough digs into the northern plains during that window, the dynamics for organised severe weather, potentially a significant outbreak, could be in place. The warm moist air that has been sitting over the south all week is not going to simply disappear. It is going to be there as fuel when the dynamics show up. Let me close with what I think is the most honest way to frame everything we have talked about today. The summer of 2026 has produced 3 major heat dome events across the United States. The first one killed people and broke records. The second one followed close behind. The third one is here right now in late August, at a time when historically the atmosphere would be offering the first hints of seasonal relief. The fact that these events have come in rapid succession, with shortening intervals between them, is not random variation. It is consistent with the forcing mechanisms at work: a Super El Ninyo in rapid development, a positive Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation pumping energy into the system from the Atlantic side, Gulf waters running above average, and a global surface temperature record that NOAA just confirmed as the hottest July in United States history. The winter of 2026 into 2027 is going to be shaped by the strongest El Niño in modern recorded history. What that means specifically for each region of the country, I'll be covering that in depth as we move through October and November and the models sharpen their resolution on the winter pattern. What I can tell you now is that the atmospheric reorganization driven by a Super El Niño at this strength will not be subtle. For right now, today, the next 7 days, stay safe. The South is in the middle of a dangerous event. The mid-Atlantic is entering its peak window. The overnight temperatures are not recovering. The models are not offering any meaningful break before August 28th at the earliest. And the larger forcing pattern that produced this summer is not going anywhere. Tomorrow I will be watching the model runs for any update on cold front timing across the northeast. If the GFS warm signal for Philadelphia and DC holds, that will be a significant story for early next week, and I will cover it in detail. If this breakdown gave you a clearer picture of what is happening and why, a like on this video tells me to keep going deeper. Share it with someone in the South right now who deserves to understand the full scope of what they are living through. Before I get to the closing forecast, I want to take a few minutes on something that I think is genuinely underappreciated about how heat events like this one differ from the severe weather we typically track on a channel like this. A tornado warning goes out. People in the warning area act on it. They go to their safe room, their basement, their interior hallway. The tornado passes, the warning lifts, the threat resolves in minutes. There is a clear mechanism of awareness and response. Heat does not work like that. Heat builds, it accumulates. It does not announce itself with a rotating wall cloud or a siren. It arrives over days, and the most dangerous stage, the compounding of physiological stress across multiple nights without recovery, often happens below the threshold of conscious alarm. People feel tired, they feel sluggish, they drink a little less water than they should because they are inside and do not feel like they are exerting themselves. And then, 4 days into a heat event with overnight lows staying above 80, the body's reserves are depleted in ways that are not visible until a medical emergency happens. The National Weather Service has been improving its heat communication significantly over the last few years. The move toward leading with heat index values and overnight low temperatures rather than just daytime highs is a meaningful improvement. But public response to heat warnings still consistently lags behind public response to severe weather warnings, and the fatality data reflects that. Heat kills more Americans in a typical year than any other weather phenomenon. More than tornadoes, more than sudden floods, more than hurricanes, and in a year like 2026, where 3 consecutive heat dome events have rolled through the country in a span of 7 weeks, the cumulative toll is not going to be small. I want to mention Phoenix specifically here, because the Southwest story this summer has its own character that is distinct from what the South and East are experiencing. Phoenix has now recorded multiple stretches this summer where daily high temperatures exceeded 100 degrees for weeks at a time. The desert Southwest does not deal with the humidity load that Memphis or New Orleans faces, but it does face a different and arguably more physically brutal version of extreme heat. The overnight lows in Phoenix during this summer's heat events have repeatedly failed to fall below 85 degrees. At 85 degrees overnight in Phoenix, the air conditioning system in your home is not recovering the interior temperature to a comfortable or restorative level by morning. It is fighting just to keep the temperature from climbing while the sun is down. People who cannot afford to run air conditioning continuously, or who live in older housing with less effective insulation, are dealing with interior temperatures well above 85 even in the overnight hours. The Phoenix pavement surface temperature story is one of the most viscerally alarming data points of this summer. Ground surface temperatures on asphalt in Phoenix reached measurements near 175 degrees Fahrenheit on several days this summer. At those temperatures, a person who falls on the ground, whether from heat illness, a fall or any other reason, can sustain third-degree burns in under a minute of contact. Emergency room physicians at Valleywise Health in Phoenix have reported a summer unlike anything they have seen in terms of heat-related admissions, and the patient population they are seeing is not just the unhoused, though that community is extraordinarily vulnerable. It includes people who miscalculated how quickly outdoor exposure at extreme temperatures becomes dangerous. Now, back to the immediate forecast and what I am watching most closely over the next 24 to 48 hours. The 12Z GFS run this morning showed an interesting feature that I want to flag for the Gulf Coast specifically. There is a weak disturbance tracking along the northern Gulf Coast that the GFS has been picking up for the last few model runs. This is not a tropical feature. It has no meaningful circulation, and the sheer environment in the Gulf right now would not support tropical development. What it is doing in the GFS solution is introducing a small window of increased cloud cover and isolated storm development along the immediate Gulf Coast from roughly Pensacola westward through Biloxi and Gulfport on Saturday afternoon and evening. If that feature verifies, and I want to be clear that the European model is not showing it with the same clarity, some Gulf Coast communities could see a brief period of lower heat indices during that window, but the signal is inconsistent enough across model runs that I would not plan around it. Treat Saturday as a full heat advisory day from Texas to Georgia. The European model's handling of the ridge over the next 6 to 8 days is the more credible reference point for the overall pattern evolution, and the Euro is showing the ridge holding firmly. Through Tuesday, beginning its eastward to shift on Wednesday and Thursday, and producing the mid-Atlantic heat peak around August 25th and 26th as I described earlier. The ensemble spread on the Euro for this time period is narrower than I would expect, a relatively high confidence forecast for this range. That higher confidence in the pattern holding is actually one of the more concerning signals in today's data. For those of you who want to think about when the heat breaks for your specific region, here is my best assessment based on this morning's data. Gulf Coast region, Texas through Alabama. The most likely window for a meaningful shift toward lower heat indices is around August 28th to August 30th. Southeast Georgia, South Carolina, the Florida Panhandle. Similar timing, possibly a day or two later, with August 29th to 31st as the most likely window for the first front to push through. Mid-Atlantic, Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, New Jersey. Peak heat around August 25th and 26th, then a gradual easing beginning around August 28th. New England, the heat arrives latest and also departs fastest as the trough to the east creates more favourable conditions for frontal passage. The most likely relief window for New England is around August 28th through September 1st. Those are estimates, not guarantees. The ensemble spread for anything beyond day 5 in a blocked pattern like this is substantial, but that is the central tendency of the data as of this morning. One more thing I want to address before I wrap this up, because the question has come up consistently in the comments over the past 2 weeks. Is there any sign that the Omega block pattern is going to break more fundamentally before September? Not just the individual fronts, but the underlying blocking pattern itself. The honest answer is that the block is supported by the same large-scale forcing, the El Ninyo atmospheric response, the positive phase of the Pacific decadal oscillation, the anomalously warm ocean surface temperatures across multiple basins that produced it in the first place. Those drivers are not weakening. The teleconnection indices that would signal a fundamental pattern transition, a shift in the Madden-Julian oscillation phase, a change in the North Atlantic oscillation, do not show a clear transition signal in the next 2 to 4 weeks. The pattern is going to evolve at its margins, individual fronts will push through, the heat will shift geographically as I described, but a fundamental breakdown of the blocking pattern before mid-September is not in the data. What I do expect, and what the GFS ensemble mean is beginning to hint at for the late August to early September period, is the increasing risk of severe convective weather along the pattern boundaries. As the ridge shifts east and the contrast zone between the warm air mass and the cooler air to the north sharpens, that boundary becomes a corridor for organised storm development. The Great Plains and the Midwest are the areas I'm most focused on for that developing severe weather risk. If you are in Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri or Illinois, keep your severe weather awareness elevated as we move into late August and early September. The heat that has been dominating the southern tier is going to be the fuel for whatever organised storm systems develop along those boundaries. Stay safe out there. I will see you tomorrow.